Okay, welcome to another episode of the Green Top Outdoors podcast. With us today, we got the DWR in the house, Justin Folks and Alexandra
Lombard.
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Being here.
Good to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Yeah.
We love having you guys join us here all the time for, talk about what the DWR is all about. But today we're going to talk about deer season coming up, and CWD is going to be probably the main topic here. Before we get into that, Justin, you have returned because this is your third podcast, isn't it?
Yes.
So
Nice.
remind
back.
everyone what you do for the DWR.
So I'm the deer project leader for the state, so basically the state deer biologist. So I get all the complaints about too many deer and too few deer. So that's a lot of what I deal with. But so all things deer management.
You ever get a call that says, I got just the right amount of deer?
I haven't yet.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if I've ever,
Man, my 1,000 acres has 200 deer on. It's perfect.
Yeah, I have to ask
you
Matt
don't
Knox
get that.
to see if he ever got a phone call about that. But I imagine
herd
he did
is
not.
perfect.
Yeah, perfect. We're doing a great job.
I like it.
I haven't heard it yet.
Well, if you get enough highs and lows, I would say the job is right there in the middle.
Yeah, so that's funny because one thing that Matt Knox told me, he said, if you're pissing off both sides equally, you're doing a pretty
just
good
fine.
job.
Yep. Yeah, you're doing just fine. The herd's okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Alexandra.
Yeah, Alexandra. You got it.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I want to
It's a
keep wanting to
tough
call her
name.
Alex, too, but I know
I know.
it's Alex in the warehouse.
I once knew an Alexandra, and I called her Alex all the time. But
Yeah.
Alexandra, let's talk about what you do for the DWR.
Yeah, so I am the wildlife health coordinator for the state, and so mostly I manage our chronic wasting disease program, and then I am also involved with a lot of other wildlife health issues in conjunction with our wildlife veterinarian.
Okay.
Excellent.
And what's your background? How long you been with DWR? And
Yeah, I have been with DWR for a little over 2 years, almost 2.5 years now. Prior to that, I worked for the Ohio Division of Wildlife, and my education is wildlife health and disease related for the most part.
Okay.
So
You from Ohio?
I am from Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where about?
Go Bucks. Columbus.
Columbus. Nice.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, I guess scenery-wise, it's kind of similar. Virginia's a little similar to Ohio, isn't it? But not, a little flatter
Not
out
quite
there.
as-
Yeah,
Cold,
there's a
green.
lot more mountains here, and
Yeah.
I love living next to the mountains.
Okay, good.
Southeast Ohio has hills. It's the foothills of the Appalachians, but I do love living
And
in
where do you
Virginia.
live in Virginia?
I live in Waynesboro.
Okay, you're in a perfect
yeah,
spot.
I'm
Yeah.
right next to the National Park Blue
Yeah.
Ridge Parkway. Yeah.
You got drivable mountains there.
Yes.
If you go east, everything smooths out a little bit. You go west, you're straight uphill.
True,
Yeah. Cool.
true,
It's
yeah.
a good spot. And where you at, Justin?
And then
Stanton.
you and
Stanton?
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
spot. Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
and y'all came a good little distance to get here, but
Yeah.
thanks for doing it.
Yeah,
we
glad to do
talked
it.
about the Deer Hunters Banquet the other night. How we can do a Zoom call, but it's better in person. It's always
Sure.
better.
Yeah.
And what better excuse to make a trip to Green Top, right?
Mhm.
That's right.
That's right.
Exactly.
Spread the news. That's
Uh-huh.
right.
So lots been going on for you all this year. I mean, it looks like the elk hunt, the annual elk hunt is over. That ended a couple weeks ago, and from what I'm hearing, there were some good successes there. We'll probably hear more about that here in the next couple weeks. We'll have to get Jackie back on so
Yeah.
she can talk about
That's
that.
6 tags. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes,
6 tags and no more than 1 or 2 out of state.
I think it was just one out of state.
Up to 1 out of state and 5 residents. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's been some giants killed. And I think this is year 3.
I think so.
yeah,
Yeah,
this
this
year
is
three.
the-
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
been several
Yeah.
high 3s and
Yeah.
one 400-inch elk
Wow.
killed. It's pretty.
But elk
Pretty
season's
intense.
over. It's deer season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wore my blades.
That's right. I like that, man.
Yeah,
I
it's
like
deer season is. I mean, muzzleloading season's coming
It's 5 days.
in 5 days.
5 days. And I know yours is good. Mine's good.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most wonderful time of the year.
Well, let's
Yeah.
kick it off, man. Let's get the deer. Let's
The,
get some information flowing our way.
Well, let's talk. Let's. I say we hit the main topic
Do the
first,
bad
and that
news
is
first?
let's talk about the bad stuff.
All right.
Yeah, chronic
we'll go up
wasting
from there.
disease. Yep, I'm always the bearer of the bad news, so that is all right. Yeah, so currently in Virginia, we have 15 counties that are CWD positive. Most of those counties are in the northern part of the state, but we do have some in the southern part of the state. This past season, we had a new detection in Tazewell County, and that was about 60 miles from the next nearest positive. And so we have these disease management areas set up around all of these positive detections so that we can enact different carcass transport regulations and things like that. So we did establish a new disease management area around the Tazewell positive this past year. So now Tazewell, Bland, and Smith are DMA 4. And then we added a few new counties to disease management area 3. So Franklin, Roanoke, and Wythe counties, none of which have a CWD detection as of right now, but they are all within 10 miles of a positive detection. So those counties are all now in a disease management area. And then we have some extra testing coming up this year in some of these new counties, including on our opening day of rifle season. So we have mandatory testing in 7 counties in Virginia this year. Shenandoah County is the one that we've been doing that one for a while. That's going to stay the same. And then down in Southwest Virginia, we have 6 counties. So Tazewell is going to have mandatory testing on November 16th. And then so is Carroll, Patrick, Pulaski, Wythe, and Franklin.
Nice. Okay.
That's with no notes. That's all off the top of your head. That's pretty impressive. Yeah.
I just did
You've
a
said
little,
that before. Yeah.
I did just do like a little tour of Southwest Virginia, giving
Okay.
a lot of public talks. So I have said this a lot lately.
Good.
But yeah, so basically just that day, if you harvest a deer in any of those counties on November 16th, then you are required to either bring it to a station that is staffed by DWR or to one of our voluntary fridge sites that are open
Okay.
year-round anyway. And then we'll get it tested for CWD. Yeah, go ahead.
So if the average hunter that kills a deer may not be able to tell if the deer has CWD, correct?
Correct. Yep. So that is kind of one of the biggest misconceptions about CWD is that you will know by looking at a deer. But the reality is that most of the deer that test positive look totally healthy. They are trophy bucks that, you would never have suspected that it had CWD or anything like that. And so that's really just because it takes a really long time for CWD to be visible to humans, basically. So it can take a year.
Several months or a year or
Yeah,
more? Okay.
year and a half to 2 years till they start showing any kind of signs.
Okay.
And then at that point, they will start to become super skinny. They will develop neurological problems, start acting strange, maybe kind of like unaware of people or unafraid of people, drooping their head, things like that. But it is not common to see a deer reach that point in the disease in Virginia right now. And so we have had a few deer over the years test positive that looked like that. But we're talking like 11 deer out of over 250 that have tested positive. Most of them looked very healthy.
And it's not likely to be spotted in a yearling or an 18-month-old deer.
You wouldn't be able to see it,
You wouldn't be
yeah.
able to tell. Okay. Because is it something they could be born with?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we actually just started allowing the testing of fawns too last year, just because they can get it in utero. It is perhaps not as common or not as likely to show up on a test, but we did have 2 fawns last year that tested
Okay.
positive.
Okay. From the mother, from the birth mother. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, would you, if there was this will all be in a controlled environment, if there was a 6-month-old fawn, this was a yearling, you wouldn't know if it got it on its own or got it from its mother if it were to be killed and tested.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we wouldn't necessarily know.
But there would be
Yeah.
no visible signs unless there was a test, a proven positive test.
There would be no, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the only
Okay.
way to know would be by getting it tested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so and having that mandatory day, that first day of rifle season, in those counties, is there any the reason why you're doing it in those particular counties is because you feel like that's where the CWD probably exists right now?
Yeah,
hot
so
zone.
we have a few reasons for it. So we have mandatory testing basically as a way to bolster our surveillance efforts.
Sure.
And it'll be because either we have historically been able to get most of our samples that way, and that's the case for Shenandoah County in particular. We do get a lot of our samples on that particular day alone. And then some of these new counties, so like Tazewell, Franklin, Wythe, for example, we are really trying to get a better understanding of where CWD is on the landscape. And so this is our time to really hopefully get a lot of samples in one day to learn as much as we can about the disease spread.
What's the expected harvest for that day? I mean, it's so subjective. I mean,
Yeah,
it'd be several hundred
It
deer,
is
I'm
so
sure.
dependent on the county.
Sure.
Yeah, it's really dependent on the county, and especially down in Southwest Virginia, each of these counties have a little bit different regulations too. So we'll see what we get. Typically, when we add a new county to a disease management area and have this mandatory testing for the first time, we seem to get better compliance, which is helpful. So we'll kind of see how things play out. But I know
It's not a burden. It's a fact-finding mission, even for the hunters. I want to help. I want to find out. I want to get into this. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a fun day. I mean, DWR, I personally really love working that day. It's a time, we're not trying to get people in trouble or anything like that. It's just come by. We have some staff. We have some volunteers there. And we'll just chat with you a little bit, take some samples, get some info, and then send you on your way.
Yeah, be sure be sure what you're allowed to shoot that day before you
Play
shoot
by
it.
the rules. Yeah, for
You don't
sure.
want to show up with a doe and it's not a doe
Correct.
day.
You're correct. You don't want to show up with the wrong flavor on
Right.
the first day.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I will say,
no, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, if you do get, a trophy buck that you are planning on mounting, that's not a deer that we're going to cut into that day. So if you are planning on taking it to a taxidermist or anything, then we'll just get your info, and then we'll follow up with your taxidermist later on to get samples
It'll still
from
be
them.
included on that November 16th
Yeah,
report.
yep,
Yep.
you'll still be all good there.
Gotcha.
Good.
But back to the complaints that I get. So one of them is when we did away with the physical check stations. And, I grew up in that age where you had to take your deer to a place and you got the physical check card
Ride
and all
around
that
with a
stuff.
tag
And-
and a deer all day.
Yeah, and hunters are standing around and just shooting the breeze and looking in the back of each other's trucks and all that sort of stuff. And it's the same exact vibe at these mandatory day stations as it was back then, too. So, those of you that really missed that kind of atmosphere and that experience and stuff, I mean, you get it again at the mandatory day. And that's one of the reasons why I like going and doing this stuff, too, on that day, is that, like Alexander said, we get to go talk to the hunters. We're getting their stories. You got little kids coming there with their first deer and the biggest grin on their face you've seen their whole lives and stuff. And it's just really cool to be a part of that. And so, not only does bringing your deer to a mandatory day help us, I guess, as far as our surveillance and stuff goes, and helps the herd as a whole because we're better able to manage the disease and stuff that way. But I really do think it's a benefit to the hunters to be able to get that kind of experience all over again. So yeah, just another plug to
A little glimpse into the past or kind of things the way it used to be. Yeah. And like you touched on, it's a good way for the DWR to connect with hunters.
Yeah.
Not from a law enforcement perspective.
Yeah,
This is from
absolutely.
a fact-finding, information gathering perspective.
And the hunters
Everybody
are always,
needs to play by the rules, but we're here to share information.
Yeah, and the hunters are always asking us great questions, whether it's about the disease or we're aging all the deer by their jawbones and stuff. So most people walk away learning how to do that and stuff.
Sure.
It's a lot of information being exchanged there. We love talking to hunters. The hunters love asking us questions and that sort of thing. So it is a fun day. So yeah, just if you're in a mandatory county, bring your deer to us. We'd love to see you.
Yeah, it's cool.
Well, some people might be asking too, why is it so important that I know that my deer has CWD or well, I mean, I guess there's no had. It just has it. They don't really lose it, right?
Right, that's correct. Yeah, CWD is a very problematic disease for many reasons, but it is one that is always fatal to a deer. So obviously, if a deer is harvested by a hunter,
fatal.
then yes, it's inevitably fatal. There's currently no cure. There's no treatment for it. And the fact that this is a prion disease is one of the reasons why this is such a challenging disease to work with and why we don't have a cure right now or anything like that. And that just means this is a disease that's caused by a protein that is misfolded as opposed to a virus or a bacteria, which we may be more familiar with. Yeah. And so it can spread super easily from deer to deer, but it can also spread indirectly. And so deer can urinate. They can, go feed in one particular area and leave these infectious particles, these prions, in the environment, and then other deer can come by and pick it up that way. And then humans can also aid in this spread of disease by moving infected carcasses, whether they know that or not, and things like that. So it is just a very challenging disease to fight. And once it gets established in an area, these prions can remain infectious in the environment for years. And so, once it's there, it's kind of there. And there's not a whole lot that we can do about it.
So I got 2 questions with that. One, I guess one of the one of the easiest places for deer to catch this from other deer is that like if there's a salt lick or
mineral site,
something like that.
Yeah.
Because it's a big community petri dish, I guess, is
Sure.
the best way to put it,
I bet that's all it
Yeah. Anytime deer are congregating in a way that they wouldn't naturally,
Right.
they are more likely to spread disease to each other. And so that is why, in our disease management areas and then counties near them, kind of bordering them, feeding is not allowed year round. And really that's just because we don't want to aid in this spread of disease as much as we possibly can. There's a lot of other reasons why feeding deer and could be harmful, but when it comes to CWD in particular, we really want to try and minimize how much we're bringing deer together.
Right.
And they're social animals by nature, but if you were to get 10 in a regular circle compared to 40, now it's 4 times the odds of one of them being sick and one of them spreading it to another.
Yeah.
If you had a mineral site or a corn pile or a salt lake or whatever it may be.
Yeah, you think about, one deer comes through, they happen to be infected, they're leaving their saliva, they're urinating, all that stuff around there. They're going to interact maybe with other deer that are there, and then they're going to leave, and then other deer are going to come through, maybe feed from that same spot and pick it up that way.
And same could be said for a natural scrape, but it's not as much of an attractant or a direct food. It's more of an indirect thing. It's more of a nature thing. It's not a food thing.
Right.
So if a doe walks through a scrape by a buck that has CWD, there's a chance maybe, but at least you didn't funnel her. to
Right,
it.
exactly.
You didn't bait her in. Really,
Yeah, that is a natural way that
Sure.
deer are potentially spreading CWD.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let me get to the scary part of this. I don't know, have humans contracted CWD yet?
The answer is, as far as we know, no.
Okay.
There is no evidence to support that humans can become infected with CWD at this point in time. There's still a lot of research going on and kind of a little bit of an unknown as to whether or not it's possible at all. But at this current time, we do not have evidence that humans have been able to become infected.
It's good news.
Yeah, good news. But I will say the CDC still recommends that you take caution. And so if you do have a deer that tests positive, they recommend not consuming the meat and disposing of it.
So with an unknown or a known positive, is it better to cook to a certain temperature or no information on that yet?
That's a good question. So
Like a trichinosis
unfortunately, CWD cannot be cooked out of the meat.
Okay.
You would have to cook your meat at incredibly high temperatures, at which point it would not be edible anyway
Okay.
Yeah.
for many hours. So
When in doubt, don't eat it.
yeah.
Not even jerky.
So it's not like
Not
is
even
it-
jerky.
Not even
Is
jerky.
it mountain lions and some bears and stuff? They say to cook your trichinosis
Right.
off 165 or 180.
Right.
To
And
no knowledge, no information that says you can cook out the
Yeah.
CWD at least to make it edible.
And that's
those,
really 'cause
those
it's-
diseases are caused by bacteria, so
They're
you can kill the
bacteria
bacteria.
virus
But
type.
with it
Yep.
being a misfolded protein,
Yep.
it's either cooking it to like 1,000 some degrees or bleaching it. And I
That's
don't want
kinda how
to
my-
eat either one of
That's
them.
kind of how my dad cooks it. So
Yeah.
it'll be fine. Yeah. Brown is brown. So,
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's good news. That is no hard evidence that it can be contracted by humans.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
still no reason to not take precautions
Sure.
and try to do the best to, not let this spread, because it's not good for the deer population.
Sure.
And
Correct. Yeah.
That's what
That's what the
That's what
hunters are
we're-
ultimately after.
That's what we're protecting.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want our deer herds to be healthy for the long term, and CWD really threatens that.
The other side of that is hemorrhagic disease, and that's the big, I guess, confusion is some people think it's maybe the same thing, or they get these two things confused. But we talked before, I think a lot of people need to realize what the difference is between these two. And and I think what HD would probably be more prevalent, especially during dry summers, things like that. We see more of that than we do CWD. Is that correct?
Yeah, statewide. So hemorrhagic disease is caused by a virus, much unlike CWD, which is caused by a misfolded protein. So the hemorrhagic disease virus is transmitted by midges, the little biting midges, like most people call them, like no-see-ums. So these midges prefer to breed in mud flats. And so a lot of times in dry summers, you have these little water bodies like ephemeral streams or ponds and stuff start to dry up, and you get those mud flats at the edge of the water and stuff. And so it creates these prime breeding conditions for those midges. And these outbreaks of the disease tend to follow the midge prevalence. So these hot, dry summers, like we had in Shenandoah Valley for sure, southwestern Virginia as well, kind of created a perfect storm for HD and stuff. And so what we've seen historically in Virginia is these wet springs followed by dry summers tends to really elevate HD activity. And apparently it's been the same case across much of the Southeast and even into the Midwest. Talking to the folks from the Southeastern Cooperative Wildlife Disease Study down at the University of Georgia, the number of hemorrhagic disease confirmed cases this year across the U.S. has really gone up this year. So there's been several outbreaks across the U.S., but here in Virginia, I know we've had confirmed outbreaks in Augusta County and Rockingham. I think we had some down in Southwest already. I know Botetourt had one kind of outside Troutville. We had several deer being found here recently near Covington in Allegheny County. Been several deer reported dead near water bodies and stuff there as well. But back to the disease anyway. So hemorrhagic disease hits deer hard and fast. Like when they get that virus, they'll be dead within a week a lot of times. Now, some deer can survive the virus. CWD is 100% fatal. Hemorrhagic disease, some deer can survive it. So in areas in...
One's quick and fast, the other one's slow and unavoidable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And hemorrhagic disease is really unavoidable. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just a naturally occurring disease that kind of cycles to some
But sometimes
degree.
the deer can survive it.
Correct. So like in Virginia anyway, hemorrhagic disease tends to be more prevalent east of the Blue Ridge, and it seems like the further east you go, the more prevalent it kind of tends to be, whereas it's been historically more rare west of the Blue Ridge. So you get probably not as severe as summers historically west of the Blue Ridge.
Yeah.
A little bit more precipitation and stuff. The other thing that kind of limits the midge abundance are cold winters. So usually, HD activity will pick up in late summer. So right now, late September, early October through October and stuff is when that HD activity really picks up. But then once you start getting a few hard freezes, it kills back the midges and basically the HD activity goes away. So you got colder temps in the west, typically not as bad summers as far as drought's concerned. So historically, it hasn't been nearly as bad in the western part of the state. Okay. That being said, in the east, where it has been more prevalent historically, there are deer that can build up some resiliency to the disease. Okay. So if hunters out there are familiar with our DMAP, the Deer Management Assistance Program, one of the data collection things that we ask hunters for is whether or not deer have splitting or sloughing hooves, which is an indicator that a deer had hemorrhagic disease at some point in time and survived it. Yeah. Because the disease causes a really high fever, which can interrupt the hoof growth. Okay. So if the hooves, or at least two of the hooves, are starting to split or slough, that's an indicator that it possibly had hemorrhagic disease at some point that year, and that interrupted the hoof growth there. So it's kind of a way, or it is a way, that we track hemorrhagic disease across the entire state for that year.
Does it interrupt antler growth?
Doesn't seem to, because
hoof and an antler similar.
To a degree, but the antler growth is complete by the time the hemorrhagic disease starts to come around. So yeah, it's just looking at the hoof growth is the indicator there. So some deer can survive it, at least the initial onslaught of the disease. They may succumb to internal issues later on that the disease may have caused when they had it. They call it hemorrhagic disease because it causes hemorrhaging or internal bleeding. So some of the hemorrhaging and stuff they may have experienced at the initial onset of the disease may catch up to them later on in life or something like that. But a lot of times what we see is those deer get hit with it and they're dead probably within a week.
And they're typically near water because
Yes.
they're running a fever.
That really high fever, so you'll find them near or in water bodies. There was one here recently someone found in their swim pool that we tested and whatnot. So
And the disease is not necessarily derived from water. It's from the MIG.
from the midge.
So it's not if there's a dead deer in water, it's really not the water that's the problem. It's the midge. It's the infection it already had. The disease it
Correct.
already
Yeah.
had.
So a lot of people ask that too. So they found it near water. So doesn't mean that the virus is in the water. They drank the water and it killed them. No, it's those midges
the
that
other
are
way
breeding next to the water. But then
Correct.
that deer's actually going back to the water because they had that high fever. They're
Correct.
trying to cool themselves down and stuff.
Right.
So
And
there's
that's
a little
why
bit
they're
of confusion there. Yeah.
dead around water because they're or on the way to water.
Yeah.
Because
A lot of
they're
times.
so thirsty and they're running
Yeah.
fever.
Yeah.
And that the midge, it gets in. Does it get in their nose typically, or can it just enter their body?
So that's different. So the midge will just land on them anywhere and bite
Anywhere
them,
and bite
and then they'll transmit that virus when they bite and
Okay.
take it because they're feeding on blood. So when they're getting that blood meal, they're transmitting the virus that way.
Okay.
Kind of similar to what a tick would do if they're feeding off your blood, and they
Got it.
transmit whatever new viruses this week from ticks. But so bot flies are the ones you probably be thinking of,
That's
the
the
ones that
That's
go
what
up in
it's
your
doing for
nasal
nose.
cavity and
Yeah.
stuff. So completely different. So bot flies very, 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 very rarely impact a deer negatively at all. Now, it's really funky and weird to see them crawling out of one's nose when you're field dressing one and stuff like that, but it really causes no issue to the deer.
Gotcha.
So, yeah,
All right.
Other than some discomfort, probably.
maybe a little bit. Yeah.
You had, Alexandra, you had said something about the deer acting lethargic when he's got CWD, and typically in a mature deer or a 2-year-old deer or older. Is there any information that a hunter could spot? Because it's an old saying, old timers tell you, bucks will fight so hard they'll get a brain aneurysm or a concussion, and he can act all loopy, and he can be in the yard and rub his antlers on the side of your house. And is there any way you could spot the difference between that and a CWD deer, or is it similar?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Would it look very similar to the naked eye?
It can be similar. So the main thing that we're looking for is this extreme emaciation, deer that are super skinny
Okay.
and acting strange, but it is very common for other illnesses or injuries to cause kind of similar symptoms. So it's
Okay.
really hard to distinguish. So out of all the deer, that we'll respond to, our biologists will respond to, we'll get calls, they saw a skinny deer in their yard that was acting strange.
Okay.
We'll test it, most of the time they don't actually end up testing positive for chronic wasting disease. And so the location of the animal also plays a big role. If we hear of a deer in Frederick County in particular that is acting strange, super skinny, we're like, okay,
Gotcha.
probably CWD.
Okay.
Whereas if we hear one on the Eastern Shore, that
Sure,
would
right
be-
here in Hanover.
Right,
It's almost a little
exactly.
different. Okay.
It would be a lot less likely. So yes, there are other things that can cause similar symptoms in deer, which
Okay.
makes it very challenging to kind of distinguish.
But should you see what looks like a full weight lethargic buck, he's just got hit in the head with something, or he could. 2 bucks were fighting. Or got hit by a car, or he's rutting to the extreme and doesn't think about anything else. He's just wandering through yards in daylight and standing in the middle of the road, just being weird, being lethargic. But he's full weight and full health. It's likely not CWD.
Likely not CWD. Could be a number of other things.
Because I think I've seen that once, maybe twice in my life. Seen a really mature deer doing really abnormal things, but it's like November 8th, and I've always heard old timers say, well, they'll hit each other so hard it'll knock them stupid.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll have a
Yep.
brain abscess, so they'll get to
Yes.
fighting so much, and the antler from the other buck will penetrate either just the scalp or maybe even the skull, and they'll get an infection which causes an abscess, and that can make them act weird and stuff, and maybe stand still, get lethargic, all that sort of
Let
stuff
you
too.
walk
So
10 feet from them and just
right,
get
yeah.
funny.
So all of our, when we consider a deer a CWD suspect, there's 2 boxes that we check. Is it emaciated, and is it acting weird, not right? Plenty of deer act not right for various reasons.
Sure.
Plenty of deer get skinny for various reasons. But if you check those 2 boxes, that's one that we're concerned about.
One
for-
on its
for
own
CWD.
is a different thing,
Yeah.
a different infection or a diet issue or something, but
Yep.
there's 2 things together.
Yeah.
Okay. And bucks and does, it doesn't discriminate.
Nope.
It's
Right.
50-50, I'm sure.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, all deer are susceptible. All
Okay.
white-tailed deer and elk in Virginia.
Okay.
And we haven't seen it in any other species. We haven't seen it in any turkeys or haven't seen
Right.
it in any other animals.
Yeah, right now, so this is only a disease that infects cervids. So,
Yep.
yeah, deer. And we have not seen any kind of natural infection of any other kinds of animals at this point.
Okay.
But it can infect elk for sure. So that's one another concern of ours with it being in Tazewell. It's kind of getting down
right in
that
country,
neck of the woods.
Yeah.
So that kind of elevates our response to some degree, I guess, down there.
Yeah, sure.
And the severity of it, yeah. 'Cause elk are super protected. But it's just cool to have them in Virginia. It gives me a little native pride to have some of those world class elks, and I know not elks. I know nothing about them other than how pretty they are and how tall they are and how big they are and how much I'd love to go shoot one. I'd love to hunt one in any state, but it's such a cool resource that's got to come back to the state. It's really and it's a talking point countrywide in the hunting community, which is pretty cool.
It is worth it to take a trip down to Southwest Virginia to see them.
Yeah,
for sure.
And from what I hear, it's not hard to find one.
No, if you know where to go,
Yeah.
if you know where to go.
Not hard to find one.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And Justin Boyd sent me a video of one running,
Yeah, he
like
was
a
down
300-inch elk running down the road,
Yeah.
and just having a good old time. So I think he knew he was safe.
Yeah, the fact that that's now it's in Virginia it's great. Man.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome.
And there's some giants down there too, between
Well,
there and Kentucky. There's
yeah.
some giant elk. Yeah.
Well, you were hitting on like behavior of these bucks, which it's about that time of year where we're going to start seeing some very abnormal behavior from them.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah,
I'd like to see it.
I think hunters enjoy seeing that time
Yep.
of year, and they do some crazy stuff. And it made me think, when you were talking about what they do, using like grunt calls and things like that. People will use whatever they can to try to get them to come in, and what is it called? The snort wheeze is a big one that some people say, well, I've never heard one do that. I've only seen or heard one do it like one time.
I think I have heard one.
And
I've never seen one.
And it I'm like, oh, so that's what that is.
Correct.
What exactly is that?
If you see it, it makes sense because his body posture gives him away. But hearing it, I think could almost, for me, I'm sorry to take away from biologists, but it's almost like what I hear could be a doe blowing or a deer blowing my scent, or it could be a snort wheeze. I can't quite tell, but if you see it, his body postured, pretty much gives him away for me. For the one time I think I've seen it, and it was a big deer. It was a mature deer.
Is that kind of what it is? Is there a reason why they do that, or is it?
I mean, my guess would be it's just another way for the deer to tell the other buck, just get out of here.
Now or
I'm
never.
about to whoop you, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because
you don't see 4-pointers
No.
doing a whole lot of snort
no.
wheezing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a big Tom coming in on some jakes or something like that. Just telling him to get the heck away.
I've
from
always
his
been
ends.
afraid as a hunter. I've always been afraid to snort wheeze because I feel like maybe the deer I'm hunting is 4.5, and his 5.5-year-old buddy.
You
hadn't
think
showed
you got
it.
an aggressive snort wheeze?
Hadn't showed it.
You're gonna run off the big deer.
Well, I think everybody. Yeah, I think. Well, not with my mouth.
So that's my problem.
But yeah, exactly. I'm too strong. Is that I'm say the deer I'm hunting. We'll use a 140-inch 8-pointer. It's a nice Virginia class deer. It's a nice deer, and I'm giving the call of a 160-inch deer, and I'm trying to pull the 140 in, but I'm running them off with a deer that sounds bigger and tougher. I don't know. I never sat down and talked with a deer, but I don't know if my call is going to be too aggressive. He's like, man, screw this. I'm going home. So it's probably the same thing with rattling, with grunts. Am I pulling in as many deer as I'm running off? Which is just hypothetical. I don't know if anybody knows.
It's hard to say. I don't know. Like you said, haven't asked the deer yet.
Sure.
Maybe we can sit down and figure
and
that out.
I don't know
sometime.
what deer know, but I'm sure there's some sort of personality
Yeah.
types with deer, and some deer come running,
And
some deer don't. Some deer shy away.
To that point, it's something I've thought about because, with CWD being on a landscape and it taking so long for it to actually kill an individual animal, a lot of people really aren't that concerned about it because, there's still deer around.
Sure,
Yeah.
still big deer around.
Yeah, but if the prevalence rate gets so high and these deer start dying before they get
And
3
it's
or 4 years old,
100%
that
fatality
snort
rate.
wheeze you'll never hear again
Right.
because the deer are going to be dead before
Correct.
the time you get to
Yeah,
that age.
if it takes 18 months to 2 years to kill them, and there's
Right.
fawns born with it, well, all you'll ever have is 2.5-year-old deer.
Yeah, so long term,
2.5-year-old
thinking about it, long term, I've thought I don't think CWD is going to completely eradicate deer because a deer will survive to the age at which they could still reproduce and make new deer. But we're going to have a much, much, much younger age structure
Sure.
out there
Could
if
be
we
a
don't do
stunted growth
something
in an
to help
age
try
gap.
to
Yep.
slow the spread of this disease.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, because you're right. They'll make it to maturity or sexual maturity.
Yeah.
but they'll never make it to physical maturity.
Right.
Yep, which is how you lose your big deer and your populations. Yeah.
That's why it's important. You know, you got to
Yeah.
educate.
Get ahead of it.
That's why we're here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Andrew,
I got a
think
note.
you
I got a
have,
notebook full of questions.
You got a lot of questions. I don't know. I,
I can start anywhere you like.
You can start. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna start at the top.
Yeah.
Spikes. I got spikes in the middle, so we'll come back to that.
All right.
Things that I'm seeing. This is more Andrew questions and state of Virginia questions. Things I see around my house. If I find a buck rub, which is a number of things, I think a common misconception is bigger the tree, bigger the deer. And from what I've been told and what I know and what Matt has told me, doesn't matter. If he can get his antlers around it, he's rubbing his forehead, not his antlers. Doesn't matter. If he can rub the tree, he'll rub the tree. Some of them may look bigger, or be higher or lower or wider or bigger trees, and maybe has bigger antlers. But the deer's really trying to rub his forehead, not as much the tree. Am I correct in that?
So I think it's
Not
partly
always bigger the rub, bigger the deer.
So I would say like the biggest trees are probably your biggest bucks, but the big bucks will also rub small trees.
Could rub a twig.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think, from what I've heard and read about and stuff, it's partly, so some of it can be just rubbing off velvet at that time of year. Some of it is, I've heard of, it's a way for bucks to strengthen their necks for when they go to fight and stuff like that. But it's also marking posts to let other bucks know that they're in the area, let does know that they're in the area. And when they do scrape that bark off, yes, that's when they start rubbing their forehead on it because they have those scent glands
and it's
there.
typically, I don't know the name of the tree. It's coniferous, maybe? Or
Not
a tree that
necessarily.
puts off scent.
Not necessarily. I mean, you see
a
a lot of
on
like
cedar trees.
striped maple, red maple,
Okay.
pretty much anything they can get,
And
their head on.
A rub is as much visual as it is scent.
I think so,
Okay.
yeah.
For deer communication. And then my real question is, do bucks typically rub the same area year over year? So at my house, in several instances I've seen the last week, what looks like this year's rub or a fresh rub, which I think can be deceiving too, how much wind you have, how many leaves fall. When you see, it looks like you're kindling all over the bottom of the tree, but then you go back 2 weeks later, it looks exactly the same. So say I got a fresh rub, I turn over there, and there's a rub but potentially a year old, and over there is one that's 2 or 3 years old. So this is definitely a rub spot. Is it likely that that's the same deer, or that is just my herd's pattern? That's where they like to put rubs, because you see the same thing with scrapes. You see scrapes year over year in either the same tree or same 10-foot radius. And that was my next question, is rubs and scrapes. Do they have a year-to-year overlap, which I think they do, but is it typically or not necessarily the same bucks or different bucks? That's a big question. I'm
yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
So
And that was a first-hand account, some things I saw this weekend.
I'll say this. I don't know the answer, but I can speculate, I guess.
My
so
assumption is yes. My speculation
that would also be mine. So with some caveats. So I would think, a deer or a buck, there's, with the GPS technology and stuff we've had now and looking at buck movements and stuff, various universities have done studies on stuff like that. Some of these bucks will have an affinity for certain areas of their home range and stuff they'll continually revisit and stuff. So I can see bucks continuing to come back to the same area to make the same rubs in the same vicinity, I guess.
If this is the deer's home range and he summers here, he grows here, he eats here, and he doesn't leave for the winter. This is his home range. This is the area that he likes to rub and scrape. It's kind of, or even a wintering deer that moves over a property.
So I think that's certainly possible. But I also think that, maybe it's just a young-ish cutover. It might be a 10, 12-year cutover, and it's just full of trees that bucks like to rub.
Sure.
Those 3, 4, 5-inch diameter trees.
Yeah,
so you could
4-inch cedar tree.
So it could just be a factor of there's a lot more trees there that bucks would like to rub on.
I think that too. Yeah.
So it's a combination of
Because
things.
then across the property, there's an area over here that's like, we've killed nice deer, we never see scrapes, never see rubs. And over here, it's every other tree has a rub on it. I'm sure that has something to do with, these are the trees that they like. Maybe they rub here and they scrape there and they bed here and they eat over there, and it's just part of their regular circle, regular pattern. But I've noticed more this year than ever, I'm seeing rubs beside old rubs, which are definitely last year or older or later. And most of them on 2 to 4 inch cedar trees around my house is what they like. Don't see a whole bunch right smack in the middle of the woods. I'm seeing them on outside the fields where it's a little denser, a little thicker. on the edge cutovers or inside of cutovers that are about 5 or 6 years old. It's got just the right trees in it.
Right.
And
It could
that
just
might be
be
their
normal travel
their
patterns.
pattern. That's
Yeah.
just in their loop. That's just where they go. And maybe a 4-year-old deer has put a rub on this tree for 2 years. Why not this year? Throw another one on it. It worked last year.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Hard to get into his psyche.
Be nice.
But yeah, I noticed. I saw several of those this weekend. I saw Saturday. We took a tree stand down and hung a new one. Took it down Saturday and hung it on Sunday. And there's a vine that hangs off of a 50-foot oak tree at my house, and it hangs down. There's been a scrape under it my entire hunting life. There's always a scrape underneath this vine. It's chest height. It's a perfect spot and a little draw in the field, tucked away. You can't see it from the road. Everything's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
The vine was tangled up in a tree. So I took a tractor bucket, knocked it down. And because I went by, I said, well, at least there'll be a scrape. I'm not seeing much deer sign. There'll be a scrape on the vine. There was no vine. So
You're
no
going to go
scrape.
hunt the vine, man.
Yeah.
No vine, no scrape. Killed it 8-pointer last year over the vine.
Yeah.
I go by, there's no vine. I said, well, that's a bummer. I knocked it loose from a tree, finished what we were doing on a tree stand, come back the next day to hang a new stand. There's a scrape, like 16 hours later. Not a real big one, not a real clean one, but it's. I wonder if did I just drop that in his regular zone walking pattern? Because I didn't send an email out, oh dear, the vine is back. But that's just a spot, and there's scrapes around it, several on both ends of the field. But I think that is just a reoccurring trend. It's a perfect. You could not hang a hemp rope in a better spot. Just looks perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And they found it overnight. With human scent and tractor diesel fuel all over the place, they walked right to it, made a scrape, and off he went. And hopefully in 4 days, it'll be bigger, it'll be cleaner, it'll be a lot of prints in it and a lot of tracks in it.
And I'll be there
We'll see
waiting
what
for him.
Yes, yeah.
Now
Remind
I
me to
know
send
where
you the
it
pin
is.
where the vine is, yeah. But it seems like it was, I almost got my answer on the spot. Like, they always put a scrape here. There's no vine here. There's no limbs. That's a perfect spot. I gave him a limb, and there it was 12 hours later.
Yeah.
So it was kind of neat to see. It gave me some faith in the deer. Next is spikes.
Well, I'll bring me to my question, because
Here we
this
go.
this
This
time
will
of
go.
year, it's a time of year. Well, it's already happened. It's when the spikes get shoot off and forced to kind of go out on their own. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I mean, that's about what, mid to late September when that's happening.
By their mother
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
by the other bucks or equal.
By the mother.
That's what I've been
So
told
that's
too.
kind of Mother Nature's way of making sure that they're not inbreeding. So that buck, it disperses about this time of year.
Before the rut.
Yeah, so that's kind of another reason why we see such a big uptick in deer vehicle collisions this time of year. So not only is it the rutting season, but it's also those yearling males are dispersing and trying to find their own little territory, their own little spot in the world and stuff like that. So yeah, those yearlings are getting kicked out by mom because the does will still stay with her in that maternal group.
Yeah.
But it's those yearling bucks that are getting shooed out by mom.
Year-and-a-half-year-old bucks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So button bucks will stay
Yeah.
for
Until next
for the
year.
next calendar
Yep.
year.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why this year, I mean, you'll start to see where you got trail cameras, your bow hunting, whatever. You'll just see some spikes or
Showing up.
3-pointers or maybe even 4-pointers.
4s and 6s potentially, yeah, I guess.
Depending on where you're at, you might see, yearling 8 points.
Right. Yeah.
It'll be a little tiny.
Yep.
Typically,
Yeah, they won't have very long times, but they might
90-pound
have 'em.
frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a small
Yeah.
deer. Matt told us the same thing, and it made me feel. That's what I've always been told. I said the bucks, the bigger mature bucks don't typically run off the little bucks because they're not even there to run off. The mom is already, they're gone. And she's running them off from some genetic instinct so that she doesn't
Yep.
get inbred and get bred back
Yep.
by her own fawn. So if I see a spike, if I see a spike in November, is it likely somebody else's spike? Neighboring property came, maybe on one end of the farm, and then he came from the other side where his birth mother's not around, or it's just so many unknowns.
A lot of unknowns. I mean, like I mentioned with the GPS studies and stuff that have happened on bucks and whatnot, there's just so much movement that bucks do. And they may have one home range, a certain season range here, and then have another one miles away and stuff. And every now and then we'll move in between and stuff. And then you've got bucks that will just take, they call them excursions. They'll just go like 50 or more miles just in one direction for seemingly no reason at all. And what all that information tells me is that I don't need to really put too much stock into what his range is or where he's, spends the majority of his time or whatever. Just be in the damn woods.
Yeah,
put ass in seat. Something will happen. Because another buck's doing the same thing.
Maybe
somewhere.
you had a buck on camera all year long that is quote unquote your buck that you've been chasing after and stuff. And come hunting season, he might be, several properties away.
Literally get killed in the next county.
While at the same time, your buddy who's had the same thing going on, well, now his buck is showing up on your property. So with all these, that's the magic of November right there. Sure. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Yep.
That deer that you had on camera all year long could end up getting shot by somebody else. Well, guess what?
I'll get his too, potentially.
Or someone else's is way bigger and stuff.
Sure.
So just,
I've always thought that is a buck trade. There's going to be a trade somewhere.
Yep.
So the 1,000 acres that I'm hunting has 5 shooters on it. What I'm looking for is just all these big square numbers. 1,000 acres, 5 shooters. I'm gonna lose 2, 3, 5 of them. Might lose them all, but I might get 6 in trade. I may not lose any. It may just gain 2. I'll likely lose half or more and pick up half as many. That's always been my opinion. There's 4 or 5 nice bucks around this farm, and every winter there's 4 or 5 nice bucks around this farm. Don't know if they're the same ones. Very hard to tell.
right.
With no trail cameras, kind of hunting old school. I just, is he what I'm after or not? Do we shoot or do we not shoot? So, just because I see a nice deer, that doesn't mean he spent all summer here.
Right. Yeah.
Or this could be the first time I ever saw him. Which has been a lot of good hunters have given that information out too. Is your best chance to kill him is the first time you ever see each other. It goes down tremendously after that because maybe he didn't wind you or doesn't look like he winded you, but he knew something was up. And if you gave yourself away, it's over. Now, just because you miss him or miss your opportunity doesn't mean it's over, but it's not likely that he's going to make that mistake exactly the same.
Yep.
He may come in this way with this wind, this way with this wind, crisscross you. He might only hit that field at lunchtime. Just never know. But it seems like your odds of killing a really nice deer on a second or third encounter is almost non-existent. When you get him, he just see it all over Facebook. First time I ever saw him, 25 yards broadside.
Yep. Unless that hot doe brings it right in front
Just
of
that hot
you.
doe,
And all bets are off in. Yeah.
Yep.
That's right.
So finish up on the spikes. I'm telling you,
so
I don't want to
spikes-
keep hammering you.
Yeah, well, spikes are.
The old saying is once a spike, always a spike. True or false?
I don't believe that.
I don't believe it.
I don't think so either.
I don't believe it. And
And
I
then
think there's been studies, we talked about this earlier, that have, captive studies where they've had yearlings that were spikes and then, followed them all the way through adulthood and stuff, and then compared them with yearlings that had at least forked antlers when they were a year and a half old. And, took their antler scores all the way through maturity and stuff. And when those deer became 4, 5, 6 years old, or I can't remember how old they were, there was only like maybe a 1-inch Boone and Crockett score difference or something like that. And that's, to me, is not significant.
Right.
Sure.
Especially at the scale with which we can manage deer in Virginia and most property sizes and stuff like that. So, shoot what makes you happy. I mean,
Sure. But same, I like it. Same answer Matt gave. He said, if you like shooting them, rock on.
Yeah,
bro. Do what you want to do.
my oldest son, not this past weekend, the weekend before, got his first deer, and it was a spike. With crossbow or whatever. I've shot several spikes. I've shot several yearlings and
11
stuff.
pointers.
And it just yeah, exactly. Those Virginia 11 pointers.
11 pointers, yeah.
And it just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. Like if I hadn't shot anything for a while and one comes out and it's everything's right or whatever, like I admit I shot a yearling a couple years ago. And it was my dad and I were together and we just watched the deer breed a doe. And it was like, how many times will someone get an opportunity to see that, and he'd be here with my dad too. So I had a story with that deer.
Yeah.
So I let it go.
Didn't your dad kill one a couple years ago?
Yeah, he had to wait for. He said,
Till
"All
he
right,
finished
come on."
breeding.
And he I mean, it was.
That's a nice deer,
It was
too.
a tense moment.
Yeah.
And he just said, "Man, come on now." And then he waited, and then he harvested the deer. But it was a really nice buck.
It was, and to see something,
I'm like,
Your
man,
dad
I don't know if I could have waited.
your dad was pretty late in life, maybe the first time to ever see that.
Oh yeah,
And it happened right in front of him.
right
Happened right through
in
the
front
scope.
of
So
him.
it was pretty cool.
Yeah, during muzzleloading season. So.
With the spikes, just saying that word makes me feel good. Gives me a little dopamine hit. How can you spot?
First of all, Alexandra, do you concur on the spike?
Yeah,
I need to get your opinion on
correct.
Yeah, no, I'll let you
I
guys.
don't think I've never. The old timers will tell you. I would say 60 and older. That generation will tell you. Once spike, always a spike. He's a year behind. His bad genes, whatever. I don't personally believe it. Now, if you see a spike, let's say 6-inch straight tine on one side and a short bent or maybe a possible fork right at the base. I saw one this year, kind of bent over, funky looking. How can I spot, this is a really tough question.
You mean bad genetics?
How can I spot bad genetics versus an early velvet injury versus a late velvet injury? And that was a bold question I've been reading up. I've been studying for this. Because I know some early velvet injuries can really affect the way a deer looks in 2024. And then in 2025, he's right back to where he needs to be. He hung his antlers on a branch early in the year, stunted his growth. He's got a big 4 and then nothing.
Yeah.
Or, practically nothing. And then a late velvet might look like bent metal, where they're almost hard-horned, and he had a big 8-point frame, but he bent down at the end, and then maybe next year that's a drop time. I don't know if there's a way you can spot that, especially at a 1.5 or 2.5-year-old deer. Is he worth passing or is he worth shooting?
I'd say as long as the pedicle itself wasn't damaged, then it's certainly got the potential to shed that weird antler and grow something better the next year. Yeah. Gotcha. So where the growth actually starts for the antler. So that's where it'll when they shed, it'll detach from that pedicle. It'll harden over. It'll the whole antler will fall off and stuff. So if the pedicle is actually damaged, then it very likely could grow some weird stuff for the rest of its life or whatever. As far as the other injuries and stuff after, velvet, early, late velvet, whatever. Again, like I said, as long as the pedicle's not damaged, you'll probably be all right. Just to, he'll shed that off and he'll grow something normal the next time or whatever.
Should he be injured at his base, he'll likely continue with that deformation.
Probably.
Okay.
You might get some pretty
Funky
cool
points.
looking stuff later on, yeah. As far as genetics, another thing that I don't get hung up on either, because you can't manage, you cannot manage genetics in a free range and herd.
I'm fortunate enough to be able to hunt this property. I play the hand I'm dealt. I'm not bringing in breeder bucks. I don't understand the deer's genetics while I'm hunting them, especially after. You only go off of what you know.
Yeah.
I would agree. I don't know anything about the genetics on.
Yeah, there's a study that
what this deer is even remotely going to look like in 3 years. I don't know who his mom is, who his dad is. Poor fella, he doesn't know. No.
Right.
How could you ever keep up?
There's a study that Texas A&M Kingsville, where I went for grad school, and Mississippi State collaborated on down in Texas, where they were trying to basically manipulate antler genetics in a high fence herd. So they had cull criteria where if a yearling buck didn't meet a certain antler score, they just removed it from the enclosure. And I can't remember, it was just a few years into it, they were running out of deer. They were running out of bucks and so with however many years they went into it, they had to just stop the study because they were just running out of bucks because there's no way. Yeah, there was no way to actually manipulate that. And they weren't seeing any change in the mature buck scores or anything like that. Yeah. So all you're doing, if you're trying to cull deer, based on what you think might be genetics, by taking out what you would think might be an inferior deer, you're just removing the standing crop, so to speak. So that spike that could have been a 150 one day that you wanted to be a 162 or whatever, something weird, that's just one less buck that you could have shot later on that still would have been a really nice deer.
Sure.
So yeah, there's just
based off of an old saying.
Yeah.
Spikes are behind.
I think there's plenty of research out there now, plenty of data to show you that you cannot manipulate genetics in a free-ranging whitetail herd or any wildlife species. Sure.
Just stay informed and stay updated on what's going on. And if you see something, if you're not sure about, just contact the DWR and they'll take it from there.
And get in a tree. That's how you get the best information.
Yeah,
and take a kid hunting, take a kid fishing.
Yeah.
That's right. Justin, Alexandra, thank you. I called you
very
Alexandra again.
It's okay. There's a few people that pronounce it that way.
She did say no Alex, so we got that part.
That's right. We got that right.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the information. Sorry to drill you over the spikes, man.
Sorry.
They're a hot topic.
At least I warned you. I warned you.
Appreciate
They're
that.
a hot topic. Yeah. I'm a friend of Spike, so you're good here. Yeah, friend of the Spike.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.